Hello and welcome to day 114 of Dungeon 23, the series where we make a room of a mega dungeon every day for a year. Now today's going to be our wandering monster, and it's one I'm very proud of. I call him the Spider-Mancer. He is a little goblin who is wearing a little spider costume, and he is a spellcaster. He knows some spider-adjacent spells and some spells that are limited to only being spider-related, which we'll get into later. The basic gist of him is he has 13 for his armor class, 27 for his HP, and the way he works is he'll just wander around the level, always trying to avoid the undead because they're clearly like too challenging for him. And if he encounters the party, he will be hostile unless they reunite him with his lost fly plushie. So that fly plushie is his somehow, and he just wants it back, and if you give it to him, then he's going to be calmed down. Otherwise, he's going to be just angry and violent and spidery. Now, this is clearly not all the information we have. I actually do have a character sheet for him, and we'll be hopping over to that in just a second. Alright, here we are. We have our Spider-Mancer, which obviously it's a pun on Spider-Man. Spider-Mancer, because he like conjures up spiders and stuff. He is a small humanoid, because, you know, he's a goblin, and he's chaotic evil, but let's not get too far into a tangent about alignment. As I said before, armor class of 13, because he's a special spider costume, which we'll explain a bit later. Hit points, 27, as I said, and that's based on the bugbear, because most goblins are pretty squishy. I want this guy to be a bit tougher, so he's actually more challenging. His stats are pretty good, all things considering. I mean, the only thing that's negative is his strength. And normally, goblins have lower charisma or lower intelligence. One of them is pretty low in addition to their strength, but he's pretty flat across the board for all those guys because he is magic adept, so he's not super susceptible as much as other ones. And also, he knows his stuff because he's all about knowing spiders. And he has really good dex because, well, relatively speaking, good dex because he's a goblin. And decent wisdom because that's going to be a spellcasting modifier. Proficiency bonus of 2, that hasn't changed so far. We might be getting to some higher ones in a bit, but for right now we're sticking around 2. He does have resistance to poison damage just because like he was getting like bitten by like a lot of spiders, I imagine. Like how people who professionally handle snakes tend to have like an immunity, or not an immunity, but like a resistance to snake venom because they just get bit so often. His skills of animal handling, nature, and survival probably aren't going to come up, but I like giving NPCs that stats and skills because it makes them feel like actual characters with skills and whatnot. Languages, goblin, and I'll probably just give him common too, just so he could speak common. Although he probably isn't gonna be too reasonable. As I said, he's only gonna like talk to the party if they give him this fly. I give him Poisoner's Kit just because I think that's appropriate. He doesn't have one on him, but just because maybe if they give him the fly and then they do some more really good persuasion checks, they could like recruit him as like a little follower and he could like make poisons or whatever. I don't know, he may be a bit too powerful for just a random follower because he does have some pretty good spells. And speaking of his spells, he is a wisdom caster, DC 12 for saves and +4 to hit for spells. I don't have him broken down into spell slots because there's different levels mixed together. It's more about how I want him to cast per day. Infestation and Poison Spray are going to be his main ranged spell attacks. He does have a melee attack that's poisoned as well, but these are going to be his main ways of doing damage. And on top of that, he has Ray of Sickness and Web, which he could cast 3 times a day. Not each, he could cast those 2 spells 3 times. He could cast Ray of Sickness twice and Web once. Web 3 times, Ray of Sickness 3 times, Ray of Sickness once, and Web's 2 times, just any 3 combinations. And it's funny because I was looking through the druid spell list to get ideas for what this guy could use, because he's basically a druid for the most part. And I realized that web is not a spell that druids can learn, or prepare rather. The only way you could prepare web as a druid is if you are a land druid and specifically take the Underdark terrain as your specialization, which is kind of stupid because the entire point of a druid is that you do animal stuff, and only animals make webs. There's no other like creature that makes webs. It's basically just spiders. And it's not just that druids only do plant stuff, which someone has said, because like stuff like conjure animals, which this guy could cast, but we'll get to in a second. Insect swarm, giant insect, animal shapes, beast bond, speak with animals, basically all these animal things. So web not being one of them is just kind of stupid. Like I get that it's like spookier, so the warlock gets it, but the warlock and the druid can have overlapping spells. Anyway, that tangent out of the way. As I said before, he can cast conjure animals, the caveat being that it's spiders only. He could only conjure animals that are spiders, like giant spiders, regular spiders, giant wolf spiders. Basically, there's only like 3 things you conjure with it, but, you know, it's appropriate for his character. Maybe like a swarm of spiders, I don't know. And the second thing you can cast twice a day is polymorph, which again is spiders only. I imagine this is more so either to turn himself into like the giant spider, and then when he gets knocked out, then he does like his other spells, or he uses it to escape by turning into a small spider and scurrying away, or he basically deactivates a player by just turning them into a spider, while the other spiders he has like in his arsenal are attacking the rest of the party, because the other spiders in the dungeon generally obey him. I mean, he, as you see down below, he has the special ability called Disguise. Spider-Mancer is disguised as a giant spider. You saw his little costume. Because of this, the spiders are not instantly hostile to him, and he has advantage on animal handling. So the animals, or rather the spiders that are like in the room with him, will just obey him. But the other ones, maybe he has to make an animal handling check, maybe he doesn't. It all depends on what's going on. But also, those spiders are just naturally hostile towards the party by virtue of being giant spiders and them being squishy little adventurers who probably look tasty to a spider. So that's not too much of a problem. And yeah, that's 2 a day as well. So we could cast our conjure animals twice. Might not do, but maybe if he breaks concentration, then he'll do it again. Or polymorph twice, which I imagine him, like I said, turning into a big spider to fight the party, and when that gets knocked down, turn into a small one to escape. Because really, certain monsters should just escape. Like, this guy isn't a dumb animal. He's a bit crazy, but he's not dumb. He knows that, like, he doesn't want to die, so he's gonna try to escape. And he has methods of escaping by becoming small and tiny and it being hard to find. Now, going down a bit further, he does have his actions. I didn't write out his whole, like, stats for his infestation and poison spray, because it's just pretty basic to get anyway, and I don't feel like rewriting the entire spell description down here. So, he has a poison scimitar, just a regular scimitar, but the target has to make a DC 13 con save or take 1d4 poison damage, and be poisoned for a minute or half as much, and I should not be paralyzed, I should be poisoned. Originally it was going to be paralyzed, but I realized that the other spiders do paralyze too. So not only is it just being a bit unfair because you're constantly getting paralyzed, but also if you're already paralyzed, then his thing doesn't do anything. So, yeah. And as always, well, not always, but for the most part, when a creature is poisoned or any status effect from most creatures, the target may repeat the save at the end of their turn. Now, by virtue of being a goblin, he does have nimble escape, where he could disengage or hide as a bonus action, and that's basically what he does. Now, going down further, we do have his, like, equipment. And I didn't give a lot of the monsters equipment, but that's mainly because they don't really have equipment. They're not sentient creatures. But this guy is a sentient creature, so he does have equipment and has stuff that can be looted from him. He has a scimitar, obviously. He has a vial of spider venom, which I'll actually just say here. Vial of spider venom. When coated on a weapon or 3 pieces of ammunition, a target must make a DC 13 con save or take 1d for poison, and be poisoned for a minute or half as much, and not be poisoned if poisoned this way. Again, basically the same thing as what a scimitar does, and the thing here says the poison dries and becomes harmless after a minute of being applied, so it only stays on for a minute. Now, his doesn't necessarily last for a minute. His is already poisoned. He doesn't use this up to poison his scimitar. It's just so that you could mimic his things as loot. His spider costume, which can be looted from him if you kill him. A crudely made disguise made for a small humanoid creature. It is made for a small creature, so keep that in mind. Such as a goblin, so a gnome, a halfling. I think changelings can change their size, so maybe them. Basically, any creature that's small can wear it, and it is identical to padded armor, so it's 11 plus your dex. You have disadvantage on stealth checks because it's all puffy and stuff. I imagine it's like walking around wearing a puffer jacket where it's all that swishing sound that you hear when you're walking. That's more of me just being funny. And it also, as with the other guy, grants advantage on animal handling against spiders, and unprovoked spiders will not be hostile. If you attack a spider, it's going to defend itself and attack you. But if you just walk around, it won't care because they think you're like a spider. Because the joke is that it's a very poorly made costume, but it still works, It's goofy. And the final thing is anti-venom, which he has a 30% chance of having when you kill him. Or, yeah, basically when you kill him. Or restrain him and steal all the stuff. It's a translucent green liquid with medicinal properties. When consumed as an action, it grants the resistance to poison and advantage on saves versus taking poison damage or becoming poisoned for an hour. And that is basically our Spider-Mancer guy. Like I said, those two spiders in the room will be just friendly to him, and the other ones will be non-hostile, easily persuaded by him to attack the party because they're already gonna attack the party anyway. I didn't put doors on that room because he's more of like a wandering monster, and I didn't put mechanics for him to wander. We could just reuse the ones from the other wandering monsters. I have heard some suggestions about how to make wandering monsters like work better because I was reading a few OSR things. So I might just have to look through those and maybe just use those in the spur of the moment. Depends on what's appropriate. And yeah, that's basically our room for today. So if you want to see more goofy goblins and wacky weirdos and all that crap, consider liking the video and commenting and also subscribing so it shows up in your recommendations more often. There's also a little bell next to the subscribe button that's supposed to turn on notifications, but I don't think it really works, so try it if you want to. Or you could always come back tomorrow. It's a daily occurrence. And yeah, I apologize for the poor quality. It's not gonna get any better.